Welcome to TezTalks Radio, the global Tezos ecosystem podcast hosted by Marissa True and Stu Elms. You're tuning into a special edition episode where we showcase some of the best conversations that took place at the Art Basel speaker series supported by Tezos. Enjoy.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse Damiani. I'm a curator focused in new media, art, and emerging technologies. I run a curatorial studio called Postreality Labs, and I curated the first museum retrospective on the history of NFTs called Proof of Art at Francisco Carolinum Linz. Today, we are talking about Tezos, the art blockchain. So, in addition to the normal introductory content for these three wonderful speakers, I also wanted to ask each of you to talk a little bit about your journey into the Tezos ecosystem as a bit of that introductory content. So Matthew, we'll start with you.
Hi, thanks, Jesse. So my name is Matthew Plummer-Fernández. I'm an artist and I'm also a lecturer in computational arts at UAL. I entered the sort of Tezos ecosystem quite early on in March. Through what was then quite a new marketplace called Hikeknuk. And I started a series of images called cave paintings. A lot of my work is about using software and interrogating software systems. So through my work, especially that series, I'm looking both at AI and trying to understand and unpack what AI does and how it can be sort of reframed as maybe sort of a manifestation of a lot of human experience that's been datafied and turned into this abstraction. And then I'm also using minting on the blockchain to sort of have a conversation around the blockchain. So some of my work is about having some sort of way into having more interesting conversations around certain technologies. In my previous work, I've looked at 3D printing, looked at algorithms. I used to run a blog called AlgoPop, which looked at algorithms in everyday life and culture. And so blockchain for me was like the sort of next frontier of, these difficult conversations to be had. And I think artists are well placed to be in that conversation or doing work that, I guess, teases out that conversation even further.
Thank you. Diane?
Hello, nice to meet you all. I'm Diane Drubay. So talking about my journey, I am currently actually part of the art vertical of the Tezos ecosystem, working at TZ Connect, a daughter company of the Tezos Foundation based in Berlin. But before that, I actually started as an artist minting on Hikeknuk last year, and this basically kind of changed my life. I have been working for museums and guiding them through transformation, might it be digital innovation, ecological crisis, or social change. And then when I actually started minting on Hikeknuk, I actually discovered a new beautiful community where I felt totally empowered and mesmerized, and also a little bit overwhelmed. And so, just so excited. And basically, I started to. I'm normally a photographer doing also video art, and I actually started working a lot with digital media. I started producing 3D objects and GIF. So I just started exploring thanks to Hikeknuk. And then I've done a lot in the community, and that's why I'm here today.
Thank you. Mumu?
Hello, I'm Mumu, also known as Moon. So my journey to Tezos, actually it began, I started minting NFTs on Ethereum, and I only minted 2. And that's when I learned about like the environmental impact. And from there, I got to know about clean NFTs and proof of stake. And I got invited into the Clean NFT Discord. This is where I met Michelle, also known as the Bad Lament. I met several other artists and creators there. And one of them was Johnny Lemessier, and he started minting on Hikeknuk. And I thought it was really interesting, and it piqued my interest. So I started minting, and I really loved like the low barrier of entry and the kind of community spirit that kind of evolved throughout like whatever we did like during the early days of Hiketnunk and even afterwards. Like right now, I'm working with the TEA community. I'm being involved with like discussions and what are we going to do moving forward and how is this going to shape up. I really love like what is happening within the TEA community. As for my art, I do pixel art mostly, and one of the things that I love to do is creating animations which I start with 1 pixel and I add frame by frame like the pixels. I don't know where I'm going to end up, and it's kind of a really meditative process. The first thing that the first kind of piece that I did that way was actually my genesis on Tezos, and I think it really inspired me to just start creating like more and exploring the ecosystem.
Great, thank you. One thing that's come up in actually something in all of your answers is community and sort of the importance of the community, particularly in terms of your sort of on-ramp into Tezos. There's a number of proof-of-stake blockchains that have token standards for NFTs, and we haven't necessarily seen the sort of aggregation of artists on those blockchains quite like we have on Tezos. So I'd love to kind of open up, and this is to anyone, if you could maybe point to some reasons why you think that sort of magnetic pull has occurred on Tezos in a way that it maybe hasn't on Cardano or Solana or others.
Yeah, I think I can answer here. I think, I think we all have very different experiences that can support this conversation. But I'd say, so definitely to begin with, there was very much community spirit to working in the Tezos ecosystem, because it very much felt like a grassroots movement. There was people from all sort of different places and backgrounds, especially in Brazil, and working towards building this infrastructure to support their own community of practice and their own subcultures. And I think this is manifested and carried on through with the evolution of this Tezos ecosystem, where now we're not seeing so much a singular Tezos community, we're seeing a multiplicity of communities. There's this kind of plurality of communities, everything from a generative art community building their own tools and infrastructure for generative art on FX Hash, to seeing communities of practice that revolve around pixel art or on-chain pixel art, to communities of practice that get together around environmental concerns. And so what I find really fascinating about this particular blockchain technology is that it allows for us to all sort of coexist within one system without being territorial about it. You can be on a Tezos blockchain, literally like inserted into that ledger alongside communities, buying pictures of otters. And we don't have to, have a dispute around that. And I think that's what's really fascinating about what we're seeing now, is that sort of diversification of what we call the Tezos community. It's really a community of communities, in my opinion.
If I can add something on top of that, of course, we actually see this variety of communities, and they are blooming step by step, and it's beautiful to see. But we also have events, celebrations, moments where all the different communities are actually coming together and basically celebrating art and celebrating this experimental mindset that everyone is having on Tezos. So for instance, now it's a Tezos Art Week. We had Tezos for Tezos a few months back, et cetera, et cetera. It's during these events that you see that it's really one community looking for experimentation and this laboratory, mindset and behavior. So it's definitely fragmented, but also always caring for the same thing, the art first and the experiment first, and having fun together. And I feel this is something really specific to the Tezos community as well. But Mumu, you wanted to add something else?
Yeah, so for me, I think why the community is like such an important part of the Tezos community. It's what started. It was kind of just like it was a moment. It's something that you can't replicate. You can't like if you have enough funds or if you have like celebrities or whatever, you can't replicate that magical moment of like serendipity that kind of like started it all. But what the people who kind of like from that moment, once they joined the ecosystem, building together, not just like with the artists, but the developers in the community are also very like responsive and collaborative, right? So it started out as like a niche movement, and because of the no gatekeeping kind of thing, we don't have any like exclusive platforms on Tezos, for example. We don't have like an invite only thing, and I think that really appealed to people who want to feel included, right? Because there's a lot of feelings of being left out and feelings of, you know, you have to know the right people and you have to be from a certain background in order to be accepted. Whereas what happened with Tezos, with Hikit and with Teya and even Object and Versum and FX Hash, all of these platforms, anyone can mint there. And I think that's an important part of why people love Tezos so much, because it means that you can be anybody and you can succeed. Like I'm nobody. I'm from Malaysia. I don't have any like fancy museum art backgrounds, but I've been able to have these opportunities, and it's because of this no gatekeeping within the ecosystem that I think is really important.
Mumu, I'd love to pick up on something you said, and this again sort of opens to everyone, but maybe starting with you, Mumu. That Hikit Nuk moment was a really profound moment that I think people that are newer to the ecosystem maybe don't actually know sort of what that was or what that felt like. So I'd love if we could do a little historical work here of like situating what March and April of 2021 with Hikit Nuk kind of just felt like. Not necessarily like hitting exact days or anything like that, but just capturing that feeling in a little more clarity for the audience, because I think that's a really profound piece of the NFT ecosystem broadly.
I think at that time, it felt like you're rediscovering the internet, right? Things weren't working perfectly, like things were breaking all the time, but we feel like we're onto something and we're in it together. And it's just like, even though it was at that time like small group of people, there was like a fervor of like, you know, discovering the love of interacting with the internet. Again, it felt like, you know, when you first discovered the internet in the 90s, it felt like when you first made your own fan site, for example. That was the kind of feeling that we got during those early days. And I think because of that, it wasn't polished. It wasn't like a company or like a fancy thing. I think that made people want to experiment more, and that just made it fun. You know, it just made it fun.
Yeah, no, I think I was there also in March, and I think a lot of the sort of founding principles and values that were instilled in that original community have sort of reverberated throughout the whole sort of ecosystem, and they sort of manifested in new marketplaces. There's still this idea that marketplaces should be inclusive and accessible and open to everyone to participate in. And I think what I find really interesting is that, you know, as artists, you're trying to bring about change, or you're trying to discuss changes and being agents of change, you know, being open to new ideas. And I think what's interesting is that the sort of blockchain technology of Tezos in particular sort of reflects a little bit about that. because it's a sort of blockchain that can be transformed, it can evolve, whereas some other blockchains are kind of really stuck in their versioning systems, and and they're sort of waiting for the next version to come out. Whereas blockchain is this kind of like organic transformation. There's this constant renewal about what it is as a blockchain. It's kind of this incompleteness that actually makes it really thrive in terms of supporting art and supporting artistic ideas. We sort of get to have a little bit of say in the sort of rewriting of those rules, those underlying rules about how our work is supported and propelled forward. And I think that's what's kind of fascinating. I think Mumu says, quite rightly points out, is this kind of interaction between artists and developers, having this kind of circular open communication about the sort of future of Tezos, which is really fascinating.
It was also beautiful that everyone could help. Like, you don't need to be a developer, you don't need to have high skills or high knowledge in something. You could always help, whether it is by writing the summaries of the live streaming that we were organized at Vertical Crypto Art and Hidden were organizing, or is it just organizing some onboarding sessions on Discord, or is it just actually providing the first tez that most artists actually needed when they started on Hidden, just by sending a tweet to someone and then you receive your first tez. Everyone could actually help and support. Everyone could find their own place without any filter, without any barrier. And everyone was contributing to the same thing. And I feel it's also something that we can feel in the Tezos ecosystem at large. Everyone is working towards the same thing at the end. And there is no discrimination. It's totally open. There is no order. That's why people are can be so utopic when they talk about decentralization, because when you feel this, when you experience this kind of moment, you feel that it's possible. You feel that all the social models are actually possible, that you can talk to each other differently, you can act, you can see things moving and changing. Matthew, you were saying that Tezos is self-upgradable, and it's also what we felt with Hiketnu. Every 2 weeks or every month, we had a new thing popping up. Sometimes it was not working, but then the community was even more happy to actually join forces. Sometimes we had some big issues, but then it was actually just one member from the community telling, "Hey, be careful about that." And I feel it is still very benevolent and supportive. And it's something that I felt in 2011 when I actually organized a big hackathon for museums. And it was basically inviting so many different people coming from so many different backgrounds, people who maybe never came in a museum, to actually hack the museum for 3 days. And, it was just like, yeah, let's do it. Let's change. Let's renew everything. Let's reinvent everything. And it felt very, very good. And I still get this feeling so many times while back in this time in 2011 when I felt it for the first time. It lasted only 6 months, and then it was more about creating a structure and then giving it to the community. It was about something else. While here, I still feel it. The Tezos Art Week, yesterday I was collecting so many NFTs, and I love to do that because it's not just it's definitely collecting art, but it's also supporting, being part of a community, and it feels good in a world which is full of crises and uncertainties.
Yeah, and it not to say that it's like sunshine and rainbows and like everyone's like singing like happily holding hands, but even with moments of conflicts, when people disagree, right, it kind of shows how much people have learned about decentralization, right? Instead of like listening to just one central authority, people can they voice their opinions. And when someone is being like extra like authoritative, they're like, hey, that's not the spirit. And that is something that people have, like artists and everyone who were new to Web3 and everything, because we were raised within like the punk spirit of like whatever we were doing on Tezos, we kind of knew what it is that we're supposed to like aim towards, like what is the actual goal of like, decentralization and stuff like that. So when we see something that's not right, we will voice it. And another thing is, when something goes wrong, I love that like the community or like people are always like, okay, how can I help? And for example, if someone, if something breaks, someone says, how can I help? If someone shuts down a website, like other people will be like, okay, what can we do? How can we help? So I think instead of trying to put each other down, we all just want the best for each other. And I think that kind of, it was fostered through our experiences of like, all of this sharing, all this like camaraderie together. And yeah, I think that itself is something that you can't buy.
One thing that's coming up as all of you are talking is with, theoretically with any blockchain, you have this capacity for artists and developers to interact and sort of shape that the development of that blockchain. With Tezos and now even sort of newer proof-of-stake chains, you have this aspect of governance. And I'm curious if any of you have seen any good examples or can reference any moments in your time minting NFTs and sort of participating in the Tezos ecosystem of artists participating in governance within Tezos. Because it seems quite important, especially Mumu, as you're saying, like in times as we're having sort of compounding crises, that folks with artist mindsets, with that proverbial left brain mindset, or wait, maybe I'm mixing up my left and right brains, but point being, with this sort of artist mindset, are participating in the development of protocols and systems as much as producing, individual sort of precious object style works. So I wanted to kind of see if you had any examples, and if not any examples, any advice on how folks coming to the ecosystem could be part of those, be part of that governance and be part of those structures.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
Mimi,
continue.
Sorry, Matthew.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I was actually saying, how do we start? Because there is so many beautiful examples, actually. So I was about to ask, Mimi, what shall we start with? Is it a hackathon? Is it a hand vote? Is it Teya? Is it hackathon.art? Is it, what are we starting with? But maybe, Matthew, you wanted to start somewhere.
Within like not the blockchain itself, but like within like the platforms and stuff, we have a ton of like this kind of governance thing where like people contribute and voice their opinion and things change, such as like Teya and then Hackathon. With Teya, the voting system is on chain. The name itself was voted on by the community. So that is one example. Another example is just with people who have been minting art on Tezos, and they kind of get to know like, oh, what is delegating, what is baking, and then some of them have actually become bakers themselves and become validators by raising funds from their art and getting support from the community. One example is Crypt Teams. He runs Raspberry Pi, which he's a baker with he runs TezBerry Pi, yeah, that's the name of his bakery, where he uses the Raspberry Pi. It was like, he's an artist on Tezos and a coder. And yeah, so those are some of the examples of like people who have been involved within the artist ecosystem, like getting more involved with, the governance and stuff. Yeah. Matthew, you were going to say something? Or Diane.
Yeah, no, I just have some comments that might be able to sort of help frame this conversation, because I think what's really fascinating is that we've spoken for 20 minutes now and we haven't once singled out any singular artist. We're just constantly talking about whole groups of people that are, doing in some form their artistic practice, but we kind of think of it as a collective, or we talk about it through this kind of collective spirit, and we're sort of building tools to help that collective those collective ways of working, having governance and having ways of kind of voting on the name of a marketplace, or voting, in a way, naming your own community. And I think this is really fascinating, especially in the kind of context of Art Basel, which is, the sort of more traditional artist mindset, where the artist is this sort of heroic figure. And we heard about Marina Abramović kind of bring about this image of the hero again. Whereas I think that is to some degree counterintuitive to what we see manifest within artistic communities that are using Web3 technologies. And I find Web3 technologies almost a bit like what Ursula Le Guin refers to as a cultural container bag. So she talks about reframing technologies as being vessels for supporting and sustaining communities, everything from like the invention of the basket to the invention of the book, the sort of ways in which we sort of preserve our culture. And she always says that we revert back to the hero narrative because there's just more action and violence in the sort of hero narrative. And that's kind of a lot of the sort of narratives around artists are usually, the sort of struggle of the singular artist from Van Gogh to Jeff Koons. Whereas we're trying to tell a story here about a whole community of practice using this kind of cultural container and how we're shaping it and how we're providing this kind of landing space for whole groups of people. And it's really interesting to sort of difficulty in communicating this narrative or kind of giving it edge or power. And but yeah, I guess this is the sort of practice of having these panels, having ways of framing this conversation. It's quite interesting as a challenge.
Diane, I'd love to throw back to you. You brought up a number of great examples. Maybe if you could give us a little bit more context for Hackathon, and then also talk a little bit about your work with Alterhen. Obviously, you're involved in myriad different things, but I think there's a sort of an echo that we could get into.
Yeah, totally. But just before that, I fully agree with your point, Matthew. The individuality and the identity is a very, very different concept in the traditional art market and in Web3. And definitely, most of the artists that we collect are actually anonymous. They don't really, we don't know much about their background, where they live, even the gender. Like it's not really, it's totally not about that. Except of course if it's the topic of the artwork. But we really talk about a group and this collective intelligence, a collective action, collective purpose is also something that we kept talking about, collective impact. And that's a very, very good point, and I will definitely think about it more. And I actually think it's maybe these two generations actually facing each other, and maybe it's not one hero, but it's actually a community of heroes transforming the space. And it's what I feel with Teya. It's such a beautiful community of heroes, and it's not one individual. It's really the group having this this strong power to actually move things. And again, it was exactly the same, like the same thing happened when we all organized a hackathon. So basically, Hackathon was having a few difficulties. So the infrastructure was not strong enough. And at one point, the community said that it could be great to actually help and support. In 1 week, what was it? In a weekend, we actually all voted through a poll on Twitter on the date, and it was actually 1 week after. So 1 week after we launched, how long was a hackathon? It was 1 week, I can't even remember. But basically, all the community joined forces to create a big hackathon that we called the Hackathon. 17 working groups were created on so many different topics. Sometimes it was about DAO, sometimes it was UI, sometimes it was legal, like so many different things. And and we also received some funding from the foundation and from Tezos Commons. But I can't even remember how many people, but I think it was 300 people helping or something like that. It was a great, really, really beautiful moment. And from there, a lot of things have been built, and that's also a lot of tools that Teya is now using. And Altahan, it came also from the same kind of same frustration. Just the need to actually, the wish, the desire to actually change something. And basically, at one point on Tezos, on Hikatnook, we started to see a lot of speculative behaviors. And on Tezos, of course, speculation exists, and it's and I'm not saying that it's bad, but it's not really why we are actually producing art, and it's not why we are collecting art. We collect art to support and to be part, and we produce art to share and to and also to be part of a community. So seeing all these speculative behaviors coming on Tezos made a few artists very upset, I will say, and we just wanted to basically gather and say very loudly that Tezos is about art, and what we do and on Hikatnook is about art and about the artists. So we basically gathered with 20 artists, all coming from Hikatnook, sometime coming from the traditional artwork, sometime not, but always having another experience before Hikatnook, another artistic experience before Hikatnook. And basically we created this kind of highly curated place where it's really just about the artist. So you have different stages. You see these portraits of the artist actually looking at you. Then you read the long biography. Then you discover a series. It's not about fast conception and fast production of art. It's really about slowing down and publishing producing a series. Actually, we produced every 3 months, something like that. So it's really about slowing down and highlighting the artist. Is it the kind of stories you wanted to wanted me to share?
That was perfect. Yeah, thank you. I want to kind of take this next phase of the conversation as we sort of head toward the end, to kind of touch on the fact that we have entered this bear market on the sort of financial side of this question, where we're all speaking very fondly of art and artist communities, but there's this inevitable sort of connection between how the financial side of how the cryptocurrency is doing relative to how the NFTs are doing, and that's not always a direct sort of that can sometimes be inverse in relationship. But there's sort of two big bucket questions that I think all sit inside one conversation. So I'm just gonna kind of like lob it out in the middle, and then we can just kind of poke at it. So the first part of the question is how do you think, if we can assume that given that we're in both a traditional market recession and a bear market in crypto, that we're probably we're probably in for a pretty long winter. How do you think that impacts the Tezos artist community? What dynamics do you maybe see emerging in that? And then secondly, there's this inevitable advantage that newer blockchains have over older blockchains. They of course have older blockchains have many advantages on newer blockchains, but when we think about the rise of newer proof of stake chains that offer sort of new, maybe more advantageous aspects to artists theoretically, what do you think will need to happen within the Tezos community for artists to want to continue participating as sort of fervently and excitedly and enthusiastically as they have up to now? So that's my whole big sort of a big question to all of you.
I have one thing to say about the you're saying like new blockchains will have like this new like stuff that they can offer for artists. The thing is with Tezos, like we know technologically, sorry about that, there was wind. Technologically, there's Tezos upgrade, so it's always going to be new. So whatever fancy thing that some other blockchain is doing, we can always adopt it. So that's on the technological side. But on the art side, artists will always create, whether they are in a difficult time or having a bull run, for example. We will always create. The difference is being whether we will have more time to solely dedicate ourselves to the creation, or we have to take part-time jobs, for example. And I do see some people right now, they have to take part-time jobs, and because of the bear market and the crypto crash, for example. And it might be demotivating to some, but I think because Tezos is really low cost, it wouldn't be as much of a risk whenever you want to create and mint, right? As opposed to a blockchain with higher gas fees, for example, where you will have to put in more of like whatever you've earned salary to start minting. So there is that. If anyone has anything to add.
Yeah, so basically for the past 3 weeks, we have never seen so many heat sales on Tezos. Like for the past 3 weeks, like the numbers are crazy. People are buying so many NFTs. They're buying for a lot as well. And actually, when you look at the numbers, Tezos is the only one actually going in the positive sense, positive direction compared to other blockchain in terms of number of transactions of NFTs. So it's actually opening up even more to the global world when we have a bear market. What I see as well is a lot of artists who have been selling a lot and also creating very strong connection between artists and also with different kind of players from the art market that are actually now starting to exhibit in galleries or starting to exhibit in fairs and in real life exhibitions as well. So yeah, NFT artists from Tezos are actually already starting to find another way of living. And also something which is very crucial and which, to my mind, will change the way the next months will be on Tezos is that we start to see museums coming on Tezos, we start to see galleries coming on Tezos, we start to see beautiful contemporary artists like Marina Abramovic, etc., etc. So we actually very soon, I hope, like normally in the autumn, we will be able to see on Tezos all the different players from the art market, which is providing all the different steps to the artist's journey, from the creativity, from the art collective to the museum and the permanent collection of a museum or a very famous collector, with in between the art fairs, auction houses, and galleries. So hopefully, because all the players will be actually already active and they will be using the Tezos blockchain, the rest won't actually really matter because the users will already be on the Tezos blockchain. Well, yeah. What I keep hearing is that people are going where the artists are, and today the artists are definitely on Tezos, and the artists were actually shaping and building their own home on Tezos, and that's something that takes a lot of time and care, and it's so difficult to find it again. As Mumu, you said at the beginning, like it was one time in a life, and it will be very difficult for other chains to have the same moment.
Yeah, and I sort of agree with you there, Diane, and I think I can only really, I'm not an economist, so I don't really know, I can't say much to the, market forces, but I can only speak from my own experience as an artist that buying and selling art is actually a very small part of one's own art practice. That's just a small activity, a small component that's being exacerbated by participating in NFTs. However, most of one's own art practice is actually about sort of developing the art and the research. It could be through participating in panels like this, going to art fairs. It could be about teaching, or just having life experiences that you then make art about, So I feel like even though we're going from a market perspective, this is a winter. From an artist perspective, winters are an important component of the art practice. It's the time in which you make your work. And so I never see it as a sort of a negative thing. It's almost like a bit of a breather. And I know it can, it could be a financial difficulty for some artists, and I know, lots of artists do take up part-time jobs. Most of my students have part-time jobs because, they're not participating in an art market yet. But that seems to be part of what makes an art practice. It's this, this whole set of different experiences and moments in time, and it's not just about buying and selling. And I think collectors also appreciate that,
I love that notion across both technologies and art, having moments where the sort of insane acceleration sort of slows and people focus on building. You mentioned your students. I'd love to really quickly open up one other sort of dimension of this, which is, and this can go to you two as well, depending on what your interactions are with young people as it relates to NFTs on Tezos. But what's their read on this world? Are they skeptical of it? Are they excited by it?
Yeah, my students are really, really excited about where not just NFTs are going, but sort of digital arts as a whole is going. I'm having a whole wave of students wanting to transfer to my course, which is amazing. We've sort of doubled the size of the course because artists from more traditional pathways, from photography, sculpture, drawing, painting, are sort of realizing that there's this kind of energy around using new media, new tools, and how it sort of ties in with new marketplaces. I think for young people, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for this kind of energy or this newness and this space that's kind of undefined, so that they can put their stamp on it as well. And I find that really, there's this kind of a positive energy that I also benefit from being amongst students that feel that way.
Either of you two are virtual panelists? All right. I'm gonna. Go ahead.
No, thinking about students, I am mentoring from the beginning in the vertical crypto art residency, and just wanted to say that this is a beautiful program. The residents are just fascinating, and to my mind, it's even more interesting to be a mentor, because you can see really the development, and you can understand what are the main questions and concerns, and how we can help for the best. And I believe these kind of moments, like Matthew in your class or in these virtual classes with VCA, are really unique and really needed if you want to actually keep having this benevolent and supportive community.
Thank you. All right, I think we have time for one question if anybody's interested. And
yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for especially the history lesson that you all shared about the ecosystem, and how Diane and Ultra Hen and vertical crypto art and your students that you're teaching at the university, Matthew. I think that's a really important topic to bring up, because a lot of people don't understand the time and the effort and how the artists really had an impact, and they made that decision. And Tezos has been supporting them as an ecosystem, and the power that's behind that community. The word community comes up so many times here. But the question I have for you is, how do you envision the development of this community? What do you think it would take to continue this upward growth and this awareness that we've already built so far?
Yeah, no, I think it's really exciting that no one really fully would know the answer to that. There's so many different directions in which it can go in, and it would likely go in very different directions simultaneously. So everything from I see more and more organized events. So, instead of this being totally online thing, there's Ryan, who's asked this question, is involved in Proof of People, which is happening in Fabric in London, just to plug your event there. And I think this is, one development that I find really exciting. There's more of a sort of a networking moment. It's like we're sort of catching our breath now. We're sort of catching up. We're meeting face to face finally. But then I also think in terms of artistic practice, I think a lot of artists are still really pushing their art forwards. You know, they're sort of using this moment to, you know, I just for instance, the rapid pace of development within like the generative art scene has just been incredible, you know, over just a few months, supported by the FX Hash community. So I'm kind of continuously surprised at just how much pace there is still at all times and in surprising ways.
For Kea, we're incorporating diversity and inclusivity to make sure that like everyone can get involved. We have representatives from different countries, from marginalized communities. We have people taking care of accessibility and disability awareness. And so being able to cater to all these different groups of people means that we try to make sure that nobody is left out, because one of the beautiful things about the Tezos community and the Tezos artist community is that people come from all over the world, from different walks of life, and it has really helped people who would have been left out otherwise. So with the community, we having those representatives and building it into the DAO, which we will have a little bit more weight for marginalized communities within the voting of the DAO. I think this will ensure that people will want to be involved, especially if you believe in like equality and stuff like that. So having this diversity and inclusivity will probably be very beneficial for the whole community.
I would maybe add that I fully agree with everything that you said, Mumu, and I can't wait for this DAO to actually be set up. And yeah, just adding the fact that we need to keep having fun. It's how we all started experimenting, using this new space as a laboratory for new art practices and new art medium. We just need to still have fun and experiment, and that's also what will happen at of people in London. It will be a lot of experimentation, a lot of interactivity with the artworks, and that's what it should be about. So I'm sure like very soon we will see new marketplaces appearing and new sub-communities and new cultures, taking this fast pace, and it's good as soon as we always have fun and support each other.
And that is the perfect note to end this panel on. Thank you all so much. Please join me in a round of applause for these amazing panelists.
Thank you.